some of you, but to others, he is. So I take this opportunity to share about who Dr. Andrew Silas is. Andrew Silas has dedicated his life to helping individuals live healthier, more fulfilling lives. From an early age, he recognized his calling to inspire and guide others towards lasting wellness. After earning his degree from the College of Natural Therapeutics in 1992, Andrew embarked on a journey that would take him across the United States and around the world, teaching, inspiring, empowering people to take charge of their health. With over 35, more than 3 decades of experience, Andrew has led wellness workshops, hosted impactful seminars, and shared his expertise to radio and television broadcasts. His areas of specialization include holistic wellness, stress management, and sleep hygiene. Did you hear that? Sleep hygiene. Yet, his true gift lies in building genuine connections with people from all walks of life and helping them create meaningful, positive change. Whether in a classroom, community center, or over the airwaves, Andrew's mission remains constant to guide others towards a healthier, more balanced, and fulfilling way of living. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to present to you our presenter for this evening's TOC Sunday, Brother Andrew Silas. Over to you, Dr. Silas. Not hearing you, Dr. Silas.
Okay, just one minute. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. I am so excited to be here today. Um, and I want to thank TOC Ministry. I hope I've said that correctly, for inviting me to come and do. I always like to say I've been given the opportunity to do what I like best, and that is to share with others God's way of health and healing. Share with you, as it said in my bio, how to really enjoy and experience the life of abundant health and happiness that God has designed for us. So today's topic, as you know, as you all were aware of, is how to change the mind, fix the brain, and heal the body. Change the mind, fix the brain, and heal the body. Now, what inspired me to investigate the relationship between the mind and health and physical health is it all started when several years ago, I happened to be in home with a couple where I was doing a consultation with the wife. Um, the I remember, we were talking about different areas of health, and then the wife said to me, when we started talking um about healthy eating and how to eat and drink for health, the wife stopped me and she said, wait a minute, I don't get it. I am doing everything I can to eat healthy, and I'm the one that's sick. And my husband, he just does what he wants, eat what he wants, and he's the one that's not having any health problems. She was faced with several health challenges, and he was fine, she was saying to me. And the husband turned to me and he said, "You know why? My wife worries about everything and everybody. And that is why I believe I'm the one that's enjoying health." Well, that sparked something in me to, sparked a desire for me to go and study what's, the connection between the health of the body and the state of mind. I did discover several things. There was a lot of scientific research and evidence that validates the fact that there's a connection between the mind and the body. But that wasn't the only thing. I remember years later I was called to visit a lady who was dying of I think she had stage 4 breast cancer, and in our conversation well, she is the one that did most of the talking. There's nothing that I could have said because of the fact that she was just describing to me all that she was doing. And I'm thinking to myself as she's talking, wait a minute now. Um, I don't understand. I'm just saying to myself, I don't understand. Everything that I would share with her, she was already doing and more. So I offered to exchange phone numbers and decided to pray. I told her I'll just pray for you and stay in touch. Well, I did not speak to her for about 2 months. I was doing my traveling and so forth. And so one day I just called a lady that had recommended me to her because I couldn't get her, and just to check and see how she was doing. And the sister said to me, "Oh, she passed away." And I wasn't really surprised, but I was surprised but not surprised because I knew there was something more than what meets the eye. So I asked the lady, what do you know about this sister? Could you tell me something about her life? And she said to me, well, let me see. Her husband divorced her and took the children. And I thought to myself, oh, so that's what it is. So I told her, I said, yes, she did have cancer, but what she really died was from a broken heart. And I want to take, so that was so profound. That was so much more proof to me that there's connection between the state of mind and the human health, human physical health. And today we're gonna delve into that. I want to share with you how health and wellness are connected to our state of mind, the way we think and so forth. And my goal, my desire is that when our study is over today, you will have would have been given enough information for you to make a decision as to how you manage your mind. I'm also a certified stress management coach, and when I do my lectures or I talk to my clients, I use the term managing the mind, because the reality is, in this world that we live in, there's never going to be a time where we'll be free from situations that cause stress. We would never be free from that. There's always going to be something to cause stress. But what we have control over, what we can do is manage it. We can manage our mind. We have the power and the ability, along with God's help, to determine how to think, to choose how we're going to deal with these situations when they come up. So here's an article from the Mayo Clinic. Elda, I'm just want to do a quick check to see if I am still being heard.
Yes, we can hear you quite clearly.
And you can see my slide, correct?
No, I'm just seeing you.
Oh, okay. All right. Let me see here. Just let me go back here then. Sorry about that little glitch here. Let me just check and see what's going on here. Okay.
We're seeing you, Brother Silas,
Okay. Let me.
and we're hearing you clearly.
All right. Okay. Can you see the slides now?
Uh, i- yes. Wait,
Oh,
Um, are
we're
y'all
we're
seeing
just
my slide?
we're
No,
if you show us something, we're just seeing the
I'm seeing
front
the
page or
table of
something.
slide background, but not the slide. It's not the slide.
you're not seeing the slide. Okay.
Mhm.
Let me see.
You want to move to slide 2 and see? Because I don't know if slide 1 was the table of Christ background.
How was this?
No, the background is still there. Table of Christ background is still there.
Okay. Hmm.
Dr. Salas, you can try sharing again. I just stopped your sharing. You may try again.
Okay, let me try that and see.
Just make sure you're
Oh,
selecting your PowerPoint.
yes, I know what happened. Okay, all right. How is that now?
It's coming up.
And that
Now
was
we're
just
seeing
a
it.
practical lesson of managing stress. Thank you, Brother Simon.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is an article from the Mayo Clinic. I'm sure you're familiar with the Mayo Clinic. Um, and the article deals with the on stress management, and I'm just gonna give you a little excerpt here from that article. Stress symptoms may be affecting your health, even though you may not know it. You may blame sickness for that annoying headache, your sleeping troubles, feeling unwell, or lack of focus at work. But stress may really be the cause. And here's the next one. Uh, what is going on here? Hmm. Okay. Stress symptoms can affect your body, your thoughts and feelings, and your behavior. Stress that's not dealt with can lead to many health problems such as high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, obesity, and diabetes. And there, the list of the negative impacts of stress is very extensive. Inflammation, cancer, there's a lot of studies that show the relationship between stress and cancer, along with diabetes, stroke, and so forth, autoimmune diseases, and others. And then we have something from the Natural Library of Medicine. Epidemiologists, some epidemiological associations between corporeal disorders and psychological ill health are well established. The link between coronary artery disease and depression, for example, have been extensively investigated. And it appears that not only are the two disorders strongly associated, but that depression is a predictor of poor cardiovascular outcomes. So basically, what this article is saying from this institution is that stress can be a predictor. We're gonna say stress because depression and stress goes hand in hand. So this can actually tell you the future health of your heart or your cardiovascular system. So again, stress has been linked to these diseases. Your state of mind has been linked to physical health, and depression can also predict future problems with your heart. Now, let me share with you what the Pen of Inspiration says. You can find so many thousands of articles, medical articles and scientific articles that that have shown that show the proof, shows the evidence that there is a direct correlation between physical health problems and our state of mind, our mental health condition. But let's see what the Pen of Inspiration writes. And this is from the Ministry of Healing. The chapter is entitled The Mind Cure. The relationship that exists between the mind and the body is very intimate. When one is affected, the other sympathizes. The condition of the mind affects the health to a far greater degree than many realize. And thinking back on the experience that I've had with the lady and her husband when I was doing the consultation, and with the other lady with the cancer. This is just evidence that there is a direct relationship between their physical experience and their state of mind. And I can tell you there's so many more. One of the things that got me interested in stress management and the connection between the body and the mind is, over the years I've dealt with a lot of people who would come to me. I've had clients who would come to me who were eating healthy, they were exercising regularly, and and but still they were having these physical symptoms. And I've known medical missionaries and many who are prominent advocates of health who have died from cancer and other diseases. As a matter of fact, I've had 2 years ago, I got a call from someone who said to me, I was talking to this lady and she said to me she wants nothing to do with the vegan diet or the vegetarian diet because everyone that she knows is a vegan or vegetarian has some kind of health problems. And the thing is, even though we know that a plant-based diet is synonymous with healthy living, with health, healthy with good physical health, it is not the only component of sound health. And today we're talking about the mind part of it, the mental part of it. So I'm just sharing that to tell you that there's so much evidence to validate what we're reading here. There's scientific evidence, and and for me personally, there's evidence that I've seen as I work with people with health issues. So the relationship, I'm going to repeat the quote, the relationship that exists between the mind and the body is very intimate. When one is affected, the other sympathizes. The condition of the mind affects the health to a far greater degree than many realize. And as we continue with our presentation, I'm going to show you what really happens, why this is so. And the quote continues, many of the diseases from which men suffer are the result of mental depression. Let me put in there, men and women suffer, are the result of mental depression. And by the way, it's not just adults that experience this. Children also experience stress and all of these negative emotions. Now look at this carefully. Grief, anxiety, discontent, remorse, guilt, distrust all tend to break down the life forces and to invite decay and death. Remember the lady with the cancer? Grief, anxiety. Now she was grieving over the fact not I mean, divorce is one thing. That itself is bad. That itself will cause grief. But imagine, in addition to divorce, having your children taken away from you. So she was in major grief. She was experiencing major grief. And as it says here, all of these negative emotions tend to break down the life forces. And I would like for us to pay careful attention and to let this be riveted in the mind, because in our life, we are faced with a lot of situations that are causing a lot of depression and stress and other mind-blowing issues. So these things, just remember, these things break down the life forces, the grief, the anxiety, the discontent, the remorse, the guilt, the distrust. They break down the life forces and invite decay and death. So now that I've shared this with you, I'm going to go on to share with you how this all happens. Proverbs 17:22 says, a merry heart doeth good like medicine, but a broken spirit drieth up the bones. And this is literal, this is quite literal. A merry heart, or we can say a rejoicing heart, does good like medicine, but a broken spirit drieth up the bones. So I want us to keep this in mind as we go through the study. What are some of the things that cause stress and anxiety? Can you, in your mind right now, think about some of the things that can cause stress and anxiety, and think about, is there anything in your life, is there anything in our lives at this very moment that may be causing stress and anxiety? So we have, first of all, there are different types of stresses, but for the sake of time, we're just going to go through the two major components. So we have acute stress. Examples of acute stress would be someone cutting you off. You're driving, you are going down this highway, you are in your left lane, it's a 3-lane highway, someone is over in the right lane, and that person is driving a Tesla. Why? Y model, and they know that once they step on that gas, that car is just going to zoom. And I'm sorry, not the gas, they step on the accelerator pedal because the Tesla is electric. But the person knows that once they step on that accelerator pedal, that car is just going to zoom across. So what happens? They want to get off at the next exit, which is in the left lane. And what happens is that they realize there's not enough time to wait to change lanes. So they're going to just cut you across. Now, you know what happens at that moment. At that moment, when that driver cuts you across to get into that lane, it's a lot of things that are going through your mind. It's the fear, but most important is the fear of getting into an accident, which could be fatal or very bad. So at that moment, that driver jumps in front, cuts you across, your body immediately goes into stress mode, um, what we call fight or flight. The body becomes primed to either step on the brakes or to keep going. Now, the rational thing to do at that point will be to step on the brakes. I remember driving with a friend, very close friend of mine, and this driver was speeding up to cut us off. As a matter of fact, it was the same situation, I can see the person, my friend is driving. I'm in the passenger seat, and I'm seeing the driver looking, and he's trying to get over. And what she decides to do, instead of slowing down and giving him an opportunity to go, she just stepped on her accelerator pedal, and of course, we got into an accident. So what happens here? As you prepare, as your body is preparing for fight or flight, there's some things that happen to prepare you for that. And I'm going to go back to that quickly. Before we, before I share with you what happens, I'm just going to go back a little bit here. So we have the situation of the person trying to cut you off on the road. I'm going to give you another example here by an actual experience. So there we see a picture of a bear. So one day, a friend of ours, we were living out in the country, and a friend of ours called us and told us that not too long ago, that morning, she was in our garden picking blueberries. And all of a sudden, she looked across the garden and saw a bear also picking berries. Well, what do you think happened at that time? Again, fear took over, and fear causes stress. So what she did, she immediately screamed and ran in her kitchen, ran into the house, closed the door. So as she sees the bear again, her body our body went into fight or flight mode, or we can say the body was primed for fight or flight. Now, what happens? How is the body primed for fight or flight? Well, there's a system in the brain called the HPA axis, and the HPA axis is composed of the hypothalamus. So when that lady saw that bear, immediately her hypothalamus picks up that sense of fear and stress and sends a message to the pituitary gland. It sends chemical messages to the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland send a message to the adrenal glands. All right, so here that's why we call it the HPA axis. Is that H for hypothalamus, P for pituitary, and A for adrenal glands. Now, immediately, once the adrenal glands receive the message, it immediately increases these stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. And what happens with cortisol and adrenaline? The blood pressure rises, the blood sugar rises, and the heart rate increases, and the muscle tenses. All that the body needs to either stand and fight with the bear or to run is all that the body needs for that situation is promoted, is helped by the raising of the blood pressure, the blood sugar, the heart rate, and the tension of the muscles. Okay, so now there is no longer a threat because the lady is back into her she's in her house, the door is locked, she stands at the kitchen looking out through the window, and she didn't see the bear because when she screamed, the bear also became afraid and ran off into the woods. But everything is back to normal. What happens now to the HPA axis? Now the HPA axis goes back to its normal functioning. It's no longer in that state of activation where it's no longer raising the blood pressure. It's no longer sending messages to each other, to the adrenal glands to produce the chemicals required to prime the body for fight or flight. So everything is back to normal. So we call that kind of stress acute stress because it comes and immediately it goes after the situation is under control. Similarly, with the situation with the person being cut off by another driver, but by the time you have reached maybe 4 or 5 miles, everything you're back to normal. You're calm now because you're no longer faced with that threat. That is acute stress. But we can also experience what's called chronic stress. Chronic stress is when the situations happen consistently. Examples of chronic stress would be loss of income. When a person loses income, it may take a while before they have a job again. It can take weeks or months. So every day, they see the month end is coming, the mortgage or the rent needs to be paid, college tuition, and all the different types of life's expenses um, come up, but there is no money. And like I said, that's going on for a long period of time. So there is that stress situation it has become chronic. Then you have relationship stresses. Relationship stresses could last for a long time also, um, to the point where it becomes chronic. It's ongoing. Then we have long-term illness, childhood trauma, child abuse, and childhood trauma. There's something called post-traumatic slave syndrome. Um, when a person has or post-traumatic stress disorder, those are stress situations, those are chronic stress situations. We can include that. The foreclosure of your property, a foreclosure of your home, being stressed over that can last for a long time. And these are some of the examples of chronic stress. I also included child abuse or childhood trauma. There are studies that show that childhood trauma, which lasts for a long time, can result in adult onset diseases. So with my adult clients that may be having, autoimmune diseases and other, chronic diseases, I would ask them, one of the things that I would ask when I'm doing my questionnaire is about childhood experiences, because it has been shown, there's a lot of evidence that shows how childhood trauma can result in adult onset diseases. Now, what really causes this these problems with health, what causes these health conditions when the person is experiencing chronic stress? Well, remember we spoke about the HPA axis, and the HPA axis is that system that primes the body for fight or flight. Whenever there is that fear or that threat, the body becomes primed to deal with it. The body has to react, the body has to respond to the stress situation. And the HPA axis prepares the body by by increasing the amount of cortisol and adrenaline, these stress hormones, which increases heart rate, blood pressure, blood sugar, and causes the muscles to become tensed. So when stress is chronic, the HPA axis experiences something called HPA axis dysregulation. And basically, what that means, after a while, the HPA axis starts to malfunction. In stress management, we say the body is in a state of activation. When the body stays in a state of activation, cortisol levels remain high. And that's important. That's very important as we are looking now into finding out why chronic stress can cause these diseases. And I'm gonna go through a list of diseases. We have high blood pressure, diabetes. You become at risk for these health challenges if you're experiencing chronic stress. You know, it used to be a time when I placed a lot of emphasis on diet and exercise where it comes to maintaining good health. These days, I place more emphasis on the state of mind. I place more emphasis on stress and anxiety and depression and fear. And talking about fear, you know, I've discovered a lot of my clients that I deal with are Christians. Many of them are Christians that are studying prophecy and observing the signs of the times, and they're actually living in fear. And so that state of chronic fear will cause the same problems that chronic stress would, because fear actually produces stress, causes stress. So when the HPA axis becomes dysregulated, the the cortisol levels remain high continuously. And we discovered that once cortisol levels are high, what happens? Blood pressure is affected, blood sugar is affected, heart is affected, muscles. So we are at risk for all kinds of diseases. And in the interest of time, we don't have the time to go in deeply into what it does, how it causes the damage. But what we do know is that autoimmune diseases, lupus, I've seen a lot of cases of autoimmune diseases like lupus in adults who went through childhood trauma. Because chronic stress would cause, would produce inflammation. There's confusion happening in the body with the immune system, and as a result, of this chaos, inflammation is produced. So one of the things that I do when a person tells me, "Oh, my doctor has diagnosed me with a lot of inflammation," and the first thing I ask them is, "Are you under stress, or have you been going through stress for a long time?" Now, and I'm going to get into why chronic stress will cause inflammation, but let us continue. The point that I want to make here is that when the HPA axis becomes dysregulated, the body becomes at risk for these common diseases, whether it be autoimmune or even immune depressed. The immune system can become depressed when we are experiencing chronic stress. And the reason for that is, one of the main reasons for that is that when cortisol levels increase, our immune system becomes depressed, because when the body is primed for fight or flight, it only activates functions that are necessary for fight or flight. But any functions that's considered non-essential, those functions are usually depressed, and one of them is the immune system. So studies have shown that a person who's going through chronic stress will have a depressed immune system, and that is because of the increase of cortisol level. And remember, cortisol is one of those stress hormones. So when cortisol level remains high, again, we are at risk for high blood pressure, diabetes, immune system issues like chronic infections, cancer, tumors, and so forth. So here we see that the HPA axis is very much involved in our bodies becoming susceptible, at risk for these diseases, because of the high cortisol levels, which results from chronic stress. Chronic stress and chronic fear is they're the foundations for situations that result in HPA axis dysregulation. Now, how does grief, anxiety, remorse, guilt, anger, discontent, and so forth affect the health? How do these things affect the health? Well, we've gone into the answer a little bit by talking about the HPA axis dysregulation. But let's go a little deeper as to what happened. Now, when you have a thought, chemicals such as neurotransmitters are released in the brain and they affect the physical structures of your brain and body. In other words, we can say that thoughts produce chemical reactions. All right? Thoughts produce chemical reactions. When we are under stress, we are thinking, or our thoughts are very active in the situation. You know, whether it be fear or anxiety or remorse or guilt, whatever it is, our brain, our thoughts are the ones that are actively involved in this. And whenever we think, so remember, want us to remember that all thoughts produce chemical reactions. There can be no thought without a chemical reaction. And these are the neurotransmitters, as I mentioned, that are released in the brain. And the next point of importance is that these chemicals affect the physical structures of the brain and the body. These neurotransmitters affect the brain, the structures, physical structures such as the brain and the body. So again, thoughts produce chemical reactions, and these chemicals affect the physical structures of our brain and our body. Now, examples would be, let's say you're thinking of you have a date with your spouse or with your child or somebody, and you know the morning you get up, you remember you're thinking about the date, and you're thinking about that you already plan to go to this favorite restaurant, and you're thinking about your favorite foods, and I'm sure you can all relate to this. Thinking of your favorite meal at your favorite restaurant produces dopamine, which is the happiness chemical or the happiness hormone. You know, when you think about something exciting that you're going to do, you're going on a vacation, or you ordered your new iPhone and you check and you see it's coming in today, or whatever it is, these things, the thoughts of these happy life experiences, these good experiences, when we think about these things, the body produces the dopamine, and this is the happiness chemical or the happiness hormone. Then another example is oxytocin, which is called a love chemical. You know, social bonding. When your spouse is coming home from work, or you're meeting your fiance, or you're thinking about them or your child. Anytime, any situation that involves relationships that's connected to love, um, or social bonding, those thoughts in those areas produces oxytocin, the love chemical. And there are others, but I'm just going to deal with those two. Now, on the other hand, the with these, once these chemicals are produced, remember we said in a previous slide that we showed where these chemicals, anytime we think, our thoughts produce these chemicals, and by the way, that's happening all the time. And these chemicals affect the physical structures of our body. So when you're in love or you're in good relationships, and you're thinking about that, you're involved in that with your thoughts, your body is constantly producing oxytocin. Birthing of a baby is another example of a time when oxytocin is produced. So and with your body producing these chemicals, the physical structures of your body are being affected. Your brain and your heart and your liver and your lungs. The same thing with the dopamine. Anytime these chemicals are increased, there are effects on your physical structure. And I'm repeating these things because I want us to understand how important it is. And I want us to stay there, become a part of us. Every day, as you go through life, throughout that day, you want to think about what chemicals your brain is producing, what chemicals you are producing through your thoughts, because you may not realize it, but it's affecting your physical health. So I want us to pause for a moment and think about what health problems that we may be experiencing. Am I having high blood pressure? Have I been diagnosed with chronic high blood pressure or diabetes or arthritis or some other autoimmune disease? Think for a moment. And as we think for a moment on that, then the next thing we want to do is ask ourselves the question, what kind of neurotransmitters is my body producing at this moment? What chemicals are my thoughts activating at this very moment? And then we say to ourselves, can it be that I'm producing chemicals, I'm producing neurotransmitters that may be contributing to my physical condition right now? Have I been chronically stressed or chronically in fear that's causing me to feel this way right now? And so one of the things that happen with the short term or the acute stress is, it affects our bowels. Can you recall there are times when you may be afraid of something, a situation, you got some bad news, and next thing you know, you run into the bathroom. I'm sure we can all relate to that. That's an indication of how stress can affect our physical structures. It does affect our digestive system. Can you recall times when you were under stress or something happened and you just lost your appetite? You can't eat. You are just about to sit down to have your meal, and then you got some bad news. And or you think, or all of a sudden in your mind come up the thoughts of someone you are having an issue with, and you just lose your appetite. That's an indication that your digestive system has been affected by that stress situation. So, and there's so much more to this, but I'm just gonna touch some of it, in the interest of time. So now, the question is, so we have seen what happens when we have these positive thoughts of love, relationships, happiness, joy. You know, we see how these good chemicals are produced through those thoughts. Those good thoughts stimulate those good chemicals, which affect our physical structures of the body. Now, what happens when negative thoughts and emotions such as guilt, remorse, trust, and fear, and anger, etc.? What happens when we experience these thoughts? Well, the first thing is that the brain doesn't have any chemicals to deal with negative types of thoughts. The brain doesn't have any chemicals to deal with those. And one of the things that happens when you have negative thoughts, your body produces inflammation, whether it be anger, fear, stress, whatever it is. You're walking down the road, or and somebody comes up and punches you or bumps you or something, and you get angry. Once you get angry, again, those thoughts don't have, we weren't designed with chemicals for negative thoughts. Or if you don't want to forgive somebody, someone did you something wrong and you don't want to forgive that person. By the way, forgiveness is not for that person. They're benefited, but forgiveness is more for us, more for me, because of what the thoughts of forgiveness does for my body, you know. So because the brain was not wired with for these kind of thoughts. All right, the brain is not wired for these kind of thoughts. So what happens is the brain scrambles to find chemicals to deal, because the thing is, thoughts do have reactions. Thoughts do have chemical reactions. There's no thought without a chemical reaction. So the brain has to find some kind of chemicals to respond to sync up with that thought. But the brain wasn't wired for that. So what happens? The brain tries to use the good chemicals to deal with those thoughts, but they just don't work. So chaos happens in the brain. And when chaos happens in the brain, the rest of the body is affected. And I'm going to show you why in a moment. Um, so the question you may ask the question, why not? Why doesn't the brain have chemicals to deal with these types of thoughts? And there's a very simple answer. The brain was wired for love. Now, love, not love in the sense of a relationship. Yeah, that's part of it. But when we say the brain was wired for love, we're not talking about relationship. We're talking about goodness. Let's use the word goodness and figure out what are the components of goodness. All right, kindness, compassion, patience. We can, in a nutshell, we can say the brain was wired for the fruits of the spirit. Anything that's connected to love, that involves the fruit of the spirit. That is how the brain was wired, and that is why there are no chemicals to deal with those negative emotions. So how do we know that the brain was wired for love? And how do we know why is it that that the brain cannot produce chemicals, good chemicals or any kind of chemicals to respond to negative thoughts? Well, I'm going to continue with the answer now. Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his image. In the image of God created he him, male and female, created he them. So the first part of the answer is that as to why we have no chemicals to respond to those negative thoughts, those bad thoughts, is because we are created in the image of God, right? First John 4 verse First John verse 4, it says, "He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love." And you can put in the verse there. I don't remember what the verse was. He that knoweth not God, he that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. So as we are created in the image of love, right? Because God is love and we are created in God's image. So we are created in the image of love. And I like this quote from the Pen of Inspiration in Testimonies to the Ministers, page 265. It says, God is love. God is in himself, in his essence, love. So we can say love created us, right? And we are created in the image of love. So our brain was not designed and created for anything negative. It was only designed and created for anything that's connected or pertains to love, kindness, forgiveness, and so forth. Now, I want to say compassion, and let's say kindness, compassion, forgiveness, and we can think about all the other things. How does the condition of the brain affect the rest of the body? Another very important question. How does the condition of the brain affect the rest of the body? Remember, when we are thinking good thoughts, our brain, by the way, our brain respond. That's the part of the body that responds to the thoughts. That's the first place that responds to the thoughts, our brain. And then remember, we found out that the brain produces chemicals. Whenever we think, the brain produces chemicals appropriate to those thoughts. So how does the condition of the brain affect the rest of the body? Or we can say, is there a connection with the condition of the brain and the rest of the body? So the brain is the organ. Now, this is coming from the book Testimonies. I'm sorry, this is coming from the book Mind, Character, and Personality. And by the way, everything that I'm sharing with you has been scientifically validated. But I'm sharing this with you from the Pen of Inspiration to show that this is something that God revealed to us. God reveals to us and has revealed to us and continues to reveal to us. The brain is the organ and instrument of the mind, right? Note that the brain is the organ and instrument of the mind and controls the whole body. In order for the other parts of the system to be healthy, the brain must be healthy. Now, there are different ways of acquiring a healthy brain, but one of the main ways is through our thinking habits, through our thoughts and our emotions. The electric power of the brain promotes mental activity. Now, listen to this. The electric power of the brain promoted rather by mental activity. Remember what we found out that our thoughts produce chemicals. Our thoughts produce chemical reactions. So the electric power of the brain promoted by mental activity vitalizes the whole system and is thus an invaluable aid in resisting disease. Now, this is deep, folks. This is very deep, profound, and this is something that we need to really understand. The electric power of the brain, promoted by mental activity, vitalizes the whole system and is thus an invaluable aid in resisting disease. And I'm going to add the word overcoming disease. All right. So are you beginning to see how important it is to manage our mind, manage our thoughts? Now, I tell folks, um, I, I purposefully and intentionally gain my dopamine fix on a daily basis. Now, how do I do that? I don't have to take any drug or any supplement to do that. It's a very simple way because it all has to do with my thoughts. So during the days, at certain times of the day, I will intentionally stop what I'm doing and spend a few moments thinking about God's goodness. Thinking about all his blessings for that day, whether it's just the morning or the night, whatever time of it I choose, I think about his goodness. I think about his promises, and and especially if I'm going through a situation, but I'm not waiting until I'm going through an experience in order to get that dopamine fix. I purposely, intentionally take time during the day to reflect on God's goodness. And because I know that if I'm thinking about God's love and his mercy and his grace, it's going to stimulate my brain to produce those good chemicals. Now, and what is that doing for my health? Well, it says here, the mental activity, electric power of the brain promoted by mental activity vitalizes the whole system and is thus invaluable aid in resisting disease. So I want my mind to be in such a state where the thoughts that are produced are vitalizing my body, vitalizing my heart, my brain, my nervous system, and so forth. So I do that deliberately and intentionally. And that is something I usually encourage others to do. You know, take that time off to give praise and thanksgiving to God. By the way, scientific research have shown that people who practice prayer and praise and thanksgiving or gratitude regularly, usually have better health than those who don't. And we as God's children know we've been given the counsel to give praise and thanks to God. I remember 3 years ago, I was on a mission trip, and on my mission trip, when we arrived in the country that we were going to, I discovered that the suitcase with all my clothes was left behind in the States. All my clothes. So when it was confirmed, what I decided to do, I had a choice at that moment, and the choices that I have was to get stressed and worried about not having my clothes.
Cannot
Now
hear you.
imagine being in a tropical country and without clothes. It's going to take maybe the next day that my clothes will come, and I'm going to have to figure out what I'm going to do. I'm sweating and so forth. But I
You
decided,
seem to be muted.
oh,
No, sis, I'm hearing brother clearly. Brother, I'm hearing you.
oh,
Perhaps the sister has to check her mic. Thank you.
okay,
Yes, I
Thank
okay,
you,
can
sis.
hear.
okay, yeah. So what I chose to do at that moment is So thank God, and you know, of course, I was with the group of the group of people, and I just, you know, used my voice, and I was just thanking God and praising Him for bringing us safely, for getting us through immigration without any issues, customs and all that. And I was just having a good time giving God. I was just randomly thinking about things that I can thank Him for at that moment. And so one of the people, one of the elderly people that was in a group with us, you know, she turned to me and she said, "You must be crazy." And I said, Why would you say that? She said, "You don't have your clothes and you're praising God." And so I had to give her a little lecture. And I told her, the first thing I said, "Well, that's what we're told to do. And everything give thanks, for this is the will of God concerning you. And rejoice in the Lord always." And I'm just doing what the Bible says, you know. And and then I explained to her how, if I were to get anxious and angry and upset, how it was going to depress my immune system. And this is, you know, this is COVID time, and I want my immune system to stay strong. So I've chosen to do that which will help me to maintain health. And that is, in this situation, to spend time giving God praise and thanks. So the nerves proceeding from the brain controls the whole body by the brain nerves. Look at this. The nerves proceeding from the brain control the body. The brain nerves, by the brain nerves, mental impressions are conveyed to all the nerves of the body as by telegraph wires, or today we will call it telephone wires. And listen to this, folks. They control the vital action of every part of the system. So you see, our thoughts are picked up by the brain, and the brain responds. And in response, messages are conveyed to every part of the system. So and then there's one more here. All the organs, all the organs of motion are governed by the communication they receive from the brain. All the organs of motion are are governed by the communication they receive from the brain. So your heart, your liver, your lungs, your kidney, your reproductive system, and all your systems are affected, are governed by what they receive from the brain. So whatever the brain is communicating to those organs and systems will affect the way they function. And that is why I I don't wait for something remarkable or amazing to happen in my life. Every day, I intentionally take the time to 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 experience good thoughts, thoughts of joy, you know, rejoicing, praise, and thanksgiving. And folks, I want to tell you something. There is so much we can thank God for. It doesn't matter how bad the situation is that you're facing with in life, you're going to find lots of things to thank God for and to praise Him for. And when you're thinking about Him, His love and His mercy and His grace and His kindness, I want to tell you something. My immune system has functioned so much better since I began to see a loving, kind God, a compassionate. As when I began to see a God whose love is unconditional, and stop seeing Him as a tyrant, you know, a God who watches us, who stands over us with a whip, ready to get us when we fall. Instead of seeing that, I've learned to see Him as a God who, when I fall, instead of a whip over me, I see loving arms outstretched to pick me up. Instead of seeing Him as a God, a punishing God who just waits for me to do something wrong to punish me, I saw Him as a God who restores. When I fall, when I disobey, all that is on his mind towards me is to restore me, because sin hurts, it maims, it destroys, it disturbs. And his love is unconditional. When I begin to see God that way, my health improved in a major way. My immune system functions, functions better than it ever did before. And I've learned to dwell in an atmosphere of love, of God's love, and it just makes a difference. So what do we have to do then? We have to change the mindset, change the thinking habits, change the way we perceive God, change the way we think about others, our children, our spouse, parents, whatever, whoever. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1, please correct me if I'm given the wrong passage. Verse 2, I think it says, Romans 12, verse 2, be not conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. See, we have to change our mindset about life period, about God and life period, the way we think. And where it says here, be not conformed to the world, that doesn't mean the way we dress or eat. It's not limited to that. It's the way the world thinks about life and everything in general. But renew our mind. We have to change our thinking habits. When we are in an adverse situation, we have to be conscious of the fact that we serve a God who is able to deliver us out of this, and to activate that trust, intentionally activate that trust, and change the way we think it. And as we begin to change the way we think it, as we begin to change our mindset, guess what? Our brain will be in a better state to produce those good chemicals and to give good message, good positive health and healing messages to the heart, the liver, the lungs, the immune system, and all the systems of the body. Romans 12, verse 2. I already did this, and be not conformed to this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Some of us are very miserable. We just think doom and gloom all the time. We spend our time focusing on that which is not productive, which is bad. Why can't we use the same mental energy to focus on these negative things and focus on the good things, and regardless of what's happening in our lives? Because what's the negative things that's happening in our lives does not define God's love and his power. So that should not define how we are thinking about life, those negative things. We can choose. The thing is, we have the ability, we can choose. I can choose the way I'm going to deal with whatever it is, or how I'm going to respond mentally and emotionally to whatever it is, or whatever someone is doing to me. But the Bible is filled with promises of what God can do. I've seen, folks, I've seen the power of God. I'm not just talking about what I've read. I've experienced the power of God. I've seen the dying live. I've seen the dead rise. And this, because God says it's going to happen. That's what he says that we can do. I remember 2 years ago, I was having a bad gum infection. It was bad, and I did all the natural remedies. I remember it was close to midnight. Everyone was asleep, and I lay in the bed, and I feel and by the way, this is just my level of faith. I'm not telling you to do what I did. This is just where I am with my faith. But I lay in bed, and you know how dangerous a gum infection could be. And I started to feel my head started to hurt, and I was getting a temperature. My temperature was rising, and the only logical thing left for me to do was to call an ambulance. But for a whole lot of reasons, I did not want to go that route. And like I said, I'm not telling anyone what to do. That is what I did based on my faith. And I lay in my bed and I said, Lord, Jesus himself said, all things are possible to them that believe. I've done all I can. So now I'm leaving it up to you. And this is how I talk to God. I said, Lord, I'm not joking. I am serious. Jesus himself said it. All things are possible to them that believe. And I'm believing you to take this infection away from me. And folks, guess what? Immediately, the pain stopped. Whatever I was feeling in my head disappeared, and everything was back to normal. And I said, Lord, I spent a few minutes giving him praise and thanks and went to sleep. So we have got to, I want to encourage us to really trust God. You know, inspiration tells us in the book Desire of Ages, page 86, servant of the Lord said that, you know, she said, in Christ's day, he could not perform miracles in many places because of unbelief. She said, the same power of healing that was there when Christ walked the earth, the same power exists today. And then she asked the question, why don't we see the same results? And then she gives the answer. And she said, it's because of our unbelief. She said the same unbelief exists today as in that time. So our mind, our thoughts, we live in fear and anxiety and we're stressed when we really don't have to. In Philippians 4 and verse 8, and this is how we want to focus our life. This is how we want to think. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, when I'm faced with a situation, what it may look bad, you know. I may have a deadline for a bill or something, and I might be thinking, oh man, I'm not going to be able to pay that bill. But the truth is, God has promised, says the right, many shall be the afflictions of the righteous, the Bible says, but the Lord delivers him from them all. So the truth is that God will deliver and he can deliver. So rather than focusing my mind on the situation and having my mind control with the lie that, oh man, I'm going to be in big problems, focus on the true. Whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure. I don't have a TV in my home. And I'm not telling anyone not to have a TV in their home. But I think because I don't want to focus on anything negative. And that's another story. And like I said, you know, we can choose whatever we want to. That's what I choose not to, because I want my mind to remain in a certain state. Anyway, so whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, okay, whatsoever things are lovely. Think about that for a moment, what that means, whatsoever things are lovely. And whatsoever things are of a good report, if there be any virtue, is there any virtue, and is there any praise in God's words, his promises, his love? Is there any virtue and praise in that? Yes, there is. Think on these things. Manage your mind in a way that we can think on the goodness. When the person cuts us off in the street, instead of being angry, pray for them. Who knows what's the situation this person is going through? That's how I learned to deal with road rage and stuff like that. When I see people are angry and upset and they're driving crazy, I don't say, I don't, in my mind, I don't think that the person purposely ran the red light and I almost run into them or whatever it is. I always ask myself, what's going on in that person's life that is affecting their behavior? And I whisper a prayer, I offer a prayer for them rather than being upset. So when we must change our mindset, we must renew our mind, change the way we're thinking about life, and let our thoughts be hinged on God's word and his love and his power. And what's going to happen when we do that? What's going to happen when we change our minds? Our thoughts would be of such that the brain will respond with those positive chemicals and will send messages to the rest of the body, to all the organs. And guess what? Our health will improve. Our health will improve in ways that we cannot imagine. So we want to change our mind so that we can fix our brain, and then we can heal the body. Okay, I'm going to stop here, and I didn't check my time, so if there's time for questions, think I'm ready for that right now.
Most certainly, Brother Silas. We want to just thank you, but we will thank you a little more. But right now, let's